When you're in immersion musically with an author you serve, you love, you cherish, you admire, you struggle to play the piece at its best according to what you perceive is best, meaning the intent of the composer. You want to be the closest to the style, to the genre, to the innuendo, to all the synonyms that he or she used in the notes, the chosen ones, and the replacement, and the harmony, and the melody, and the rhythm, and the pulse, and whatever, the texture, the monophony, the polyphony. Fine. All these are facts. And you play one piece of this composer and you misunderstand it or love it for the wrong reasons or love it for just loving it without good reasons. And then you do studies and learning and reading and you become well knowledgeable about the style and the identity musically of this composer's inner musical world, and then you play 100 of his pieces if they are to do. By Chopin, Brahms, Mozart, people who wrote profusely for the piano, Liszt, Haydn, any time period. What happens inevitably, willingly or not, with all your desire to be respectful to the text, respectful of the text and respectful to the detail of the text. Compare editions, compare manuscripts if you can find them, and then compare the moment of conception of the piece. And it becomes like an old friend, an alter ego. It becomes like your musical life. Through the years and centuries of existence of the piece and through the few months and years of your life's existence with the piece. So you develop a kinship. It becomes really an immersion. And so the line then becomes very thin between playing exactly what he notated or she notated that day when this music came out of their inner world to our world. And we feel blessed to have their piece to serve, to teach, to rehearse, to practice, to record, to teach in order to revisit it from the point of view of a new student. In other words, the music comes alive with the cycles of life. Birth, growth, decay. And there is some kind of kinship with the piece that you would have started perhaps as a pianist young or even a child, perceived with your different intuitive ways at different levels, and then with your knowledge and accumulated experience of performance, the piece grows into you in a dimension that becomes quasi connected to you as if you wrote it. It's not an illusion of a reality, a philosophical duality. It is an appropriation of somebody else's truth that becomes yours during the moment you serve their truth, just like when you tell a line that becomes your line as told, so that the listener or the person who watches believes in what you say, not because you recite it, but because it is organically your statement. And the breathing and the displacing of the word compared to another word, and how the syntax brings different light to the text. So the objective is factual, the subjective is your involvement. And your involvement through life, companionship with the piece, through so many seasons of your life, becomes an endless rediscovery of different layers of a piece that keeps on giving. Like a person who leaves you puzzled, attracted, their personality, their intellect, their looks, and then it grows into you and you remember their perfume even if you never meet them again. You, the imprint of their presence lives in your psyche. So you can write an opera about them, a poetry, a painting, a sonata, a ballad, a sculpture, or nothing but the memory inside you of having shared this moment of humanity, having met this person, at whichever season of the life of this person and of yours. There's not so much synchronicity in this. It's more about inner growth and how your immersion with the piece becomes such that the thin line between reciting it and retelling it becomes so transparent that it's blurred. And that is the philosophical question: is it bad or good to have such appropriation of the text? Or should you always keep a distance with the text because you serve it as a good craftsman, letting the piece exist on its own without the hug which you give through your artistic imprint on it? I will probably die not knowing exactly where that thin line is. Respecting the text is detaching yourself. Over emphasizing the meaning of the text for you is belittling the text because you hijack it for you when you perform it to the others. So do the others expect to hear it through you, or do they expect to hear the piece through you? How many of them in the audience are aware of the difference? How many of them know the piece besides you by others or on their own? How many people just take the storytelling for the marvelous, intriguing, enticing, exciting, longing experience of going through it, and while being in it, bathing in the atmosphere of the piece? More than a piece of music, it triggers inner worlds of your imagination that can people your inner worlds. And the same piece can mean so many different things to so many different people, from the detail to more than only a detail. I don't believe it's disrespectful to take time with a rubato or to take less time because of a rubato, to add a leap that is slightly different than the leap that is written. Of course, factually, as a performer, you're here to recite. If all performers were composers as in the past, that question wouldn't even occur because the concept of interpretation wouldn't exist, since every performer was the composer. And if it weren't the case, people played it in the time frame of the time place of the even of the very geographic place where it was written. So people knew how to play this music, how to hear this music, how to expect it, how to read into the notations interstices, like what if we could take a little time, add this ornament, or this leap of a seventh becomes an octave, and in the repeat we this or that. And of course, objectively, it's like taking too much freedom. We're not given that right. I think the immersion gives you that sense of, if not right, complicity with the composer's thought process with whom you've lived a good amount of your life. And then interaction, in fact. The composer's psyche speaks to you through their work, and you answer to them through their music performance, witnessed by third people on the side, audience or listeners of a recording. And beyond the mundane judgments of it's not supposed to be like that, I know better, I was told what is right, this is wrong, it's too fast, too slow. Let's say that all these variables are acceptable. And if the conviction is convincing, you can agree to disagree and to accept its reading that is different from a more textual reading of somebody else. It doesn't make it less legitimate nor more. If the composers wrote, it was not for you to recompose it. But in the time where they composed it, most of the composers recomposed each other's music when they played them. But because we're not in that time frame, of that time zone, of that time capsule, then we are in the reciting time capsule. So we have to give the make-believe that we are so intimate with the composer's thoughts that we can decipher them, we can guess them before the page turn, if not rightfully, at least plausibly, and say he could have or she could have gone in this modulation or gone back through this the cadence. And they usually do in other pieces this, and in this piece chose not to do it. And the more you know pieces of the composer, the more you see variations of what in the harmonic language they could have done, and you could try to apply it on this piece that they chose not to apply it when they chose to apply it in another piece. After all, it's their right to apply what and when they want. But it happens so that in human nature, when humans love, they tend to appropriate even the object of the love, and they say, oh, I love you if you become more this or less that. In other words, we end up by loving the piece for what it means to us, regardless of pretending to play what it meant to the composer. After all, the composer was not an interpreter, even if most of them were able to play, and some of them fantastically. It's only one vision of the piece. So if interpretation embedded improvisation or recomposition of a pattern, a gesture, an interval, a decoration, or even a thematic note, which is plausible since in the rest of the body of the work of the composer, such in similar situations on a dominant before to go to a subdominant through a 6th degree, or whatever they've done, and you feel like you wish they have done it there. Do you have the right to do it because you're in such kinship with them? Well, objectively, no. And I am my own devil's advocate in this monologue where I try to organize my thoughts in this duality that is contradictory. Respect without disrespect, disrespectfully respect. And what is respect? Recite or retell? Make others love it? If not, why don't you just bring the score and hold it as a flag in front of the audience? Of course, that would be ideal if people could read music like they can read a book on their own. Then they don't need you to read it for them, loud voice, as you are as a translator of the text. And that can be said for a cantor, it can be said for a priest, it can be said for anybody who embodies for a congregation a text that is above all of us in scope. But during the time of the performance of the piano piece, at the level of connection with it, emotional, intuitive, analytical, and loving, I believe that I have reached a point in my teaching career respecting the text for the students, because I respect the students, respecting the text for myself because I have my ethics, and then coming to the conclusion that perhaps on my own and for myself, not teaching it, that the composer might have the other day or another day have chosen a different path of where they chose to go to, through, or towards in the development of their thought process, and revisit that thought process lovingly, say, oh, what if he or she had gone this or that? So what if doesn't constitute an interpretation, and I agree that this would be considered lightness of mind and not respect or not taking it seriously. In fact, there is something very interesting about our reverence to the texts whom we admire, we serve, we share, we teach. There can be a lightness of the style with depth of the contents. And what could appear to some people as a inconsequent behavior, not fully respecting every detail of the score, on the surface does appear disrespectful. But in reality, if you look at it from the point of view of the creative and involved, not effect for the sake of effect, but deep connection to the musical expression, thought that comes through your playing of what the composer has prepared and left for us, not willingly so, but we pick it and we adopt it and we adapt it to a certain extent, even to the right note. It's not the same intonation, it's not the same audience numbers, it's not the same projection of the sound, vibrato, pedaling, anything, everything. So perhaps even unwillingly, by being away from the context of its time period, instrumental or philosophically even, we already disrespect it. But if on top of it willingly we try to play sections differently because we hoped that this composer would have done it as they might have done it in another place, that's not an explanation. It becomes almost a false disingenuine rather than false, disingenuine explanation. I think it's just because you like it that way. So my teacher used to say, if you don't like the way it's written, write your own. Don't rewrite theirs. While she's right, while those who say the text was here before us, the text will be here after us, they're right too. In your own individual connection with the text on different seasons of your life, you might at some point feel so close to the composer that you don't feel being that a betrayal. You feel like being a token of love. Now, they are mostly dead, therefore we cannot know if they would be offended, amused, perhaps indifferent, or out angry. Perhaps it's between the piece they left for us and ourselves, more than them in the equation. Take out the audience, the critics, the reviewers, the competitors, the knowledgeable musicologists, the awareness about the composer's history, oeuvre, output, analytical knowledge of everything constitutive of their musical discourse, and just live with the piece, its melody, its harmony, its rhythm, or whatever it is that makes it this unforgettable perfume that keeps enchanting you through years, even if you already know the piece and you discover more about it, as the day you discovered it. Have you heard it before by others, or you discovered it on your own? Okay, that's a bit different because we get influenced and perhaps formatted in the way we'd expect the piece to be. But I think during the ephemeral moment of our connection with the piece, it's an intense interaction with our consciousness and the piece itself. Of course, we mostly technically search to practice enough repetitively to avoid wrong notes by unwilling mistake. Fingering, phrasing, pedaling, tempo, gesture, presentation of the wrist, hand position of a stretch, how we handle it digitally, how we memorize the digital handling of it. So we go through the performance pattern of the piece with the expectation to avoid obstacles that we know are there in this and that turn of the section or the transition of the recapitulation or the coda or whatever it is that we have to go through in the storytelling. But in each time we retell it, it seems to be like the only time. And each time, no matter what we planned, no matter how much we organized it ahead of time in our preparatory rehearsals, countless hours of practicing from detail to whole, we enter in symbiosis with the text itself. We become the text during the performance. It's almost as if we have a glider and the composer's music is the air, and we just glide on it, perceiving emotions or even sensorial ways to experience it. Not only the ears, the eyes, the mind, the shivers, the sadness, the irony of it, or in it, the smile with a tear, half happiness, the longing, the true drive, the exulting jubilation, and the introspective intrusion within our depth of soul. It would be nice to find the right balance. Thank you.